2025 has been a rough year for VPNs. Think about it. There's been multiple breaches, attacks on major vendors, and the software itself is pretty clunky, leading to a rise in help desk tickets that we constantly have to monitor for users having a bad experience. But here's the thing, companies still need them, because those legacy line of business applications and file shares sitting on-prem, they're not going anywhere anytime soon. So what if I told you there's a way to ditch VPNs entirely while letting users still securely connect to your on-prem resources without the clunky experience and without the headaches? That's where Microsoft's new solution called Global Secure Access comes into play, which is their SASE and ZTNA solution, and I'm extremely excited to get into this with you today. In this episode, we're going to walk through a deep dive of the solution, including what GSA is, how to deploy it, the licensing model, and what I'm most excited about is I'm going to be able to demonstrate to you 3 different workflows here, one of which is actually using Global Secure Access to prevent Evilginx with Microsoft 365 fake login page with adversary in the middle. The second is going to be going through some web content filtering we can do with GSA to actually prevent access to shadow AI. And then number 3, I'm most excited about truly showing the magic of replacing VPNs. I'm going to walk you through a user connecting to a local file share on a device that's not domain joined and has no line of sight to the local network. This is going to be awesome, guys. Let's go ahead and dive in.
Okay, guys, so as we dive in here, we're going to go through the high-level overview of Global Secure Access and the architecture behind it. And starting off here, this is more of a traditional architecture diagram that you would see in a typical hybrid-based environment where you have local on-prem resources that are protected by some sort of firewall. Users can still VPN into this network. They can get access into things like a file share or a non-public facing line of business application, such as, a custom payroll tool is a great example of that. And then normally with this, we have local Active Directory being extended up into Entra with the Entra Connect tool here. And we're using that identity to be able to log into our Microsoft resources as well as other third-party SaaS applications we've set up for single sign-on. And the great part about that is that we can actually protect that with conditional access and have a lot more dynamic aspects to our security, meaning if a user risk changes or we see new suspicious activity, we can lock down access into these resources, which we cannot do today to our on-prem resources or users VPNing into these connections, which is why when these tools get breached, as an example, there's not a whole lot of protection here that we can begin to extend. The other piece here is obviously, unless you're using some type of third-party tool or web content filtering tool in Microsoft, they have direct access to all internet traffic. Now, as we move into GSA here, we talk about a whole different architecture that leverages Microsoft's Security Service Edge, or SSE, is a term you'll hear for that. And that would include, kind of the SASE solution as well as zero trust network access concepts that we're going to be talking about and going through today, as you can see as an example within here. But the basic premise is we have this client that we're going to install locally on end user workstations. This client can be deployed in the traditional ways we would normally push out applications to our devices, such as through group policy or Intune or RMM tool as an example. But the key thing here is this is acting as a traffic forwarding profile for all the different types of traffic we might want to set up as an admin. And specifically, when we talk about that, it's going to funnel traffic into internet resources. It's going to funnel traffic into Microsoft 365 services such as your email and Teams. But then it can also funnel traffic into the private sector of your on-prem resources. And you'll see how we can do that in this video today, but we basically install a local client in our network here as well too, to be able to connect and funnel that traffic in securely. But the really cool benefit to this is Entra now becomes your central identity platform for all of these different traffic sources. And so why that's extremely important is because we can now extend conditional access protections into all of our traffic, including the internet resources that we might want to block or give access to, such as the AI tools that I'll be showcasing to you today. But more importantly, we can extend conditional access into our on-prem resources, which is extremely powerful, even outside of the efficiencies we get here by thinking about removing VPNs from the architecture equation. The other big piece to note here is with the on-prem resources, often with VPNs, we were giving you a tunnel into the network as a whole without much restrictions on what you could access at a secondary or tertiary layer. Meaning, if you were to VPN into the network, you might be able to get access to this line of business app and the file share all encompassed. With private access, with global secure access connections, we can actually specify certain applications or certain resources within our network to provide access, and then layer in conditional access on top of that. We're walking through all these examples today, including the licensing as well too for each of these different types of traffic. But I think it's helpful to understand that as we're walking through the actual demonstration of how to set this up for each profile that you're going to create. Okay, so we're going to get started here in the Entra Admin Center. And the really cool part about this solution actually is you can start to leverage it even if you just have an Entra P1 or P2 license, which is included with base plans like Business Premium. In the Entra Admin Center, though, you can go under Global Secure Access and you can simply click on Dashboard. If this is your first time visiting this page, you'll see an Activate button here that will activate the service, but then you'll start to have more of this propagate over time. So you can immediately start getting into some of the things here that we're going to cover. The next thing that you want to do here is go under the settings and click on Session Management. We're going to click on this Adaptive Access, and we're going to make sure that this is toggled on, which is basically giving us capabilities of leveraging global secure access as part of the setting configurations that we're going to use for conditional access policies. The next thing that we're going to do here is set up a traffic forwarding profile for Microsoft. We'll get into private access and internet access, but you can actually use Microsoft traffic profile with Entra P1 or P2. So it's really helpful there. And specifically, I'm going to walk you through how this could prevent an Evilginx man-in-the-middle attack that we see very often in the space today, where an attacker will lure an individual and trick them into going to a fake-looking Microsoft page, harvest their session token, even with MFA, and then be able to breach their account. So we've toggled on this Microsoft traffic profile, and then under the users and assignments, you want to go ahead and assign this to either a specific user or group, or in this case, I've assigned it to all users. It's only applicable and only affects users who actually have the Global Secure Access client installed, but you'll see how that works here as we go through more of these settings. The next thing that you want to do here is go ahead and download the client onto a device if you're going to be using this for testing, which I highly recommend that you do before you start just deploying it en masse. They've recently added support for ARM devices for Windows as well as iOS. Today, we're going to be going through Windows specifically. I'm not going to cover Mac or anything like that, but we'll see what this looks like here on an individual machine. Now, that might not seem that slick just yet, but what we're going to do next here is configure a conditional access policy to leverage the global secure access client here in profile to be able to make sure we're coming through a secure network connection when a user is signing into 365, which will actually block one of the Evilginx man-in-the-middle attacks. I'm going to go ahead and create a new policy here, and I'm going to say that we're going to require GSA client, and I'm specifically going to include the test user that I'm going to use here as part of this. And in a production environment, you'd want to exclude, a break glass account and make sure you don't lock yourself out from that perspective. And also likely exclude the guests and external users for service providers, bare minimum. If you're an MSP, you're conducting, CSP work within that tenant. For the targeted resources, we're going to include all targeted resources. And the network one is where you're going to see something new here. And under the network resources here, this is where you'll see this new value added, which is the all compliant network locations. And this was based off of us turning on that individual setting for adaptive access that we configured earlier in this video. So in this section here, we're going to configure any network location, but we're going to exclude all compliant network locations as part of this process. And then under the grant controls, we're actually just going to block access. So we're going to go ahead and turn this on so you can see this policy in effect. I'm going to go ahead and create this here. Now, let me just show you briefly the Evilginx architecture, and then we're going to use that to try to trick the user into signing into a fake Microsoft-looking web page.
Okay, so I'm here on this device, and I've already installed the client on it here, and you'll see that come up here in the right-hand corner, and it has Global Secure Access connected. The user themselves, if they were to do this manually, this can silently install on the background and actually connect. The prerequisite being that the device itself does have to be either Entra joined or hybrid joined into the Active Directory in this particular case, but they don't get prompted to actually log in or do anything like that. It should be able to connect automatically based off of the client itself and serving that connection if you went through those steps that I showed you just a minute ago. You can see here that there's different channels that we've set up for traffic forwarding, and we'll be walking through that as we go through this demo here. But you also have this troubleshooting section here, which gets into this advanced diagnostics tool, and this is really helpful. I won't be going through this in depth today in the sense of everything that it can be used for, but it's really helpful, for troubleshooting, but also seeing the entire traffic that's being forwarded within the profile itself. So if we look within here, we have various forwarding profiles that we're leveraging as far as the traffic goes. They also have this health check in here. If you see that there's a red X on the client itself here, you can go to this health check monitor and see if there's any errors here that might be giving you indication of why that's failing.
Okay, so I've got my Evilginx infrastructure here that I stood up, and just to give you guys some background, I've showed this in other videos about token theft, but I've got this host name with this custom domain that I created years ago now, but it's called apollocyber.io, and I've created this fishlet for Microsoft 365 specifically, which is a login URL that we can hit here, or we would send as an attacker through a fake looking email, something like that, to get the user to click on it to go to this legitimate looking Microsoft page. And I've gone ahead and gotten the URL here. So this is what we're going to actually use. And let me demonstrate that by a user going to that website within their browser. Okay, so we're back on the device here that has Global Secure Access installed. And we're going to hit that URL here, and you could just kind of think, it's a little bit too much to put in one video, but think of a user clicking on a link in their email, and this is got the Apollo Cyber domain in it, which they might not recognize, but this is going to take them to a legitimate looking Microsoft web page here where they would sign in. And so I'm going to go ahead and type in my username here for this test account, CloudCapsule Labs. So to go ahead and try to sign in here. It's going to capture my company branding as part of this. And now I'm going to go ahead and type in my password. And you'll notice here on the page that I got this message that says you can't access right now. Signing successful, but doesn't meet the criteria. If we pop back over to our Evilginx server, we can see here that I actually got the username and password here, but I didn't actually get the session token that was produced here as part of this, which would include, any type of MFA token that I could use to breach the user account. Okay, so that was pretty cool, and we can actually create a lot of security protections based off of that Global Secure Access client being pushed out, and also support a lot of remote and hybrid work. The next workflow that we're going to walk through here is using the Internet Access traffic forwarding profile as part of this. So if we go under the traffic forwarding here, you can go ahead and toggle this into on here for enabled. And same as last time, you want to assign this to some users and groups as part of this. Now this one is where the licensing goes into an add-on product that you can buy, such as the Global Secure Access. Now, when we get into this profile, this is where we actually have to have an add-on product for Entra Suite as an example within here. And Entra Suite will give you access into both the Internet Access profile and private access as part of this. And you can see some of the distribution here of the pricing and so forth as I'm showing it here on the screen. Now, the next thing that we want to do here for Internet Access is under Secure, we have these web content filtering policies. Now, I've created a couple here for the sake of, preparing this demo, but whenever you go ahead and set up this policy, you're going to go ahead and give it a name, and you can call this anything that you'd like here. I'm going to say block AI specifically as part of this. You can select the action, which is block or allow. And then from within here, you can add a new rule, And we're going to say, in this particular case, I want to go ahead and block AI sites. And you give it this destination type, which is either a web category or a fully qualified domain name as part of this. And in here, I'm going ahead and can select something like artificial intelligence. And this is going to block specifically things like ChatGPT as an example. And I'll show you that as we go into it. But as you'll notice in here, there's a variety of different categories such as gambling, hacking, hate and intolerance, and so forth. And so you can select and add a variety of different profiles or web content filtering rules, and they're all under this bucket. This is only one I'm creating within here, but it's going to go ahead and deploy within here. I've also created one here for Dropbox as an example. And under the rules here, I'm saying I want to block the fully qualified domain name of this star asterisk and then .dropbox.com. It's kind of a wildcard that you can leverage here. And you might want to do other third-party storage services here as part of a compliant focus that you would say, hey, you're using OneDrive and SharePoint as part of this. After you've got your web content filtering policy in place, you'll also know that they have a default placeholder here for all websites, which effectively says that we're going to allow all internet access or internet traffic as part of this. And they've just got this wildcard here for the fully qualified domain name. Now, the next two steps that we need to do here is first go under the security profiles. And you'll notice I've already created one here for the sake of this demo, but you also do have this baseline profile, which I modified, but it's just going to have all websites as part of this, which is including that web content filtering policy. When you go to set this up, you can go ahead and give this a name as an example here, and then you can say this is enabled or disabled. And then when I go click on link, you can actually link an existing web filtering policy as part of that. And this will include all the policies we created as part of the previous step that I just went through as this example. Now, while this might seem redundant in nature, the security profile is actually what we're going to combine with a conditional access policy to enforce this on our workstations. So I'll go ahead and click on create profile here. I got this message here that says something went wrong. We're aware of this issue. We're working to fix it. I think this is also important to point out. We have this priority already created as part of this with a 100 value, which is technically why we're getting the message there. So I think this actually blew away everything that I was working on. But if we go through that real quick here, just to show block AI, and then we're going to change the priority to 101 as an example. And then we're going to link our policy, same thing we just did. And we'll do block AI tools. We're going to leave this priority to 100. We'll do next and do create profile. See, that went through okay here because of that conflict. Right now, it doesn't have that nice error message, that we would like to see that was actually telling us what was wrong. But the priority is a big one to look at in most cases if you get anything there. So now that we have that created, we can go into conditional access policies over here. And again, I've already set one up for the sake of this demo that we'll walk through. But this is one as an example where we said, we're going to call this block third-party storage and AI as an example. We're scoping this to all users, but again, if you're doing this as part of testing, you can certainly do it scope to a couple users. And then right here under the target resources, we're going to select this new option based off of setting up GSA, which is called all internet resources with global secure access. And then from here, we don't need to configure the network. We don't need to figure any conditions or even the grant controls. It's actually under the session controls here that we're going to go down and check this box that says use global secure access security profile. And this is where it'll have those security profiles that we were just looking at and subsequently created as part of this that you'll select from here. And again, we do not have to say, block or grant access explicitly. It's going to have this defaulted selected here. But the security profile and subsequent web content filtering policy is actually what's going to dictate that traffic. So I'll click on save here and we'll see this on another device.
Okay, so we're back on this device here again, and I've got that profile pushed out. If I try to go to Dropbox.com, we get this, can't reach this page button, and then the connection was reset. So it's effectively going through our traffic profile and recognizing that we have that fully qualified domain name and preventing that from occurring. Could also try to go to ChatGPT, and we'd have the same result here. So it doesn't really matter, which AI tool that you try to go to as part of this. It's going to continually try to go ahead and block that. But if I go to Copilot, as an example here, you'll notice that it takes me straight to this web page because that's part of the Microsoft traffic profile, and they're not obviously going to block access to their own AI tool. So it's a good way to prevent some shadow AI or potential shadow IT from occurring, and also your base level protections for web content filtering. My only commentary on this is that, one, from an admin testing perspective, it did take, a few hours to propagate before I actually saw this, taking effect, specifically with the fully qualified domain name, not necessarily with the web categories. That happened almost instantaneously after I pushed that out. And you'll notice as part of this, if you go to your forwarding profiles here, you'll have these different categories as you set them up. And then you have this concept of, internet access rules that we're establishing within here. And you'll see these associations here with it also giving, some default whitelisting that's part of this profile as well too. And if I go into traffic, I can also see here, the TCP connection for the protocol, and I can see that this is the internet access tunnel that's being used here. The only other thing I don't particularly like necessarily for the user experience is this looks like your internet just dropped. Not that, we have a policy in place that's more of your CASB type of solution where you're saying you can't access this site because it's shadow IT or shadow AI as an example. So it's more just I can't actually request this. And so I wouldn't want to have users, submit help desk tickets in lieu of us just saying you can't access these sites as an example.
Okay, guys, so the last profile I'm going to take you through is the private access, which I'm most excited about, probably why a lot of you hopped on to see this video today. But if we go under the traffic forwarding, again, same process here. You'll recognize this is pretty repetitious in the sense that you need to have the trafficking profile defined, and you need to have it assigned to active users or groups as part of this. But the other big thing here now is we're going to go under connectors. And this is where, I've gone in and set up a new connector as part of this. And this is something that you would download this connector service onto, a resource on-prem. In this case, I did it to my domain controller that's local, that's hosted on a private network as part of that. And that part of that ecosystem, again, this is just test data. Normally you wouldn't do this, but I also set up the file share to be on that as well too. So this will actually set up and activate and showcase right immediately as soon as you download this connector service on that particular resource. In this case, it's the domain controller. It'll require a restart, and then you'll see it show up here. And then part of this, if we take a look here as part of this, this gives us that active information. They have this concept of a connector group in case you had multiple connectors that you're installing. And the purpose for that largely is so that you can begin to decouple, different services that might be local, i.e. what I was talking about earlier, you might have a file share that you want to give access to explicitly versus, something like, your line of business application as part of that process. So that's one of the things that you need to set up right away as part of this. And then under the application section here, this is where you can begin to develop this concept or connection here that's called quick access. And quick access was built from Microsoft to kind of be a targeted way that you could access all resources within a certain perimeter. And in here, you're able to define this application segment. And so within here, I've actually defined, the IP addresses that are local, that are private, that we'd want to connect to, as well as the fully qualified domain name as part of this. And I've also set up this connection for private DNS. And this is something that, as it states here, lets you query your own internal DNS servers to resolve IP addresses for the internal domain names. And that's helpful because it allows users to go ahead and query, as we'll see, a file share as an example, using the normal path that they would for that network share versus thinking about having to put in a custom IP. But the really cool part is this is the entire configuration, as you'll see, to actually get this stood up to have the magic happen behind the scenes, which is Microsoft using Global Secure Access to create this connection, with the local resources, but also do all the backend configuration for that tunnel and what it looks like in the specific IP that it's going to be routed from. So within here, this is very basic from an administrative standpoint to set up. And then you'll want to make sure you have this assigned to a user group as a particular talking point. And that, again, in this case for me, is my test user that I'm leveraging as part of this. But the interesting thing is here, you can begin to add other applications as part of this that show up as enterprise apps from within here. And this is really helpful because it can begin to allow you to segregate different types of on-prem resources as part of your deployments. I'm not going to be going through that in depth today just for the sake of time. I just wanted to show you guys high level of how this works. But consistent theme again here is that you can tie these into your conditional access policies. So within here, I could create a new conditional access policy here. But the cool part is this is nothing new necessarily from what we've said, is a requirement for how we would leverage a conditional access policy. So we could say require admins for, file share access, or quick access as part of this. And you could go through and you could say, this is defined specific users or groups. But the key thing here is you would say select resources, and then in here, you're going to by default have access to the quick access enterprise app as part of that. So I'm not going to walk through this completely because it's dependent on the business of how you might want to filter this or allow for certain users to access. A great example might be that you have a line of business app on-prem that's for specifically payroll. Users can hit it if they're on the network. It's not publicly facing, but they can get to it in a browser as part of that experience. But you only want people on your finance team to be able to access that versus a legacy VPN deployment where if they VPN'd into the network, they could technically hit that website as well too, even though they're not part of the finance team. So you can begin to see some of the power of this solution, but let's go ahead and pivot back over to that end user device so you can see them actually connect to a network share and some of the things going on behind the scenes.
So before we pivot fully, actually, I wanted to show this is the domain controller that I've got set up here, and this is just a basic demo share that I've established. I've got this folder here for test documents. And I'm going to go ahead and create a new folder that is, resources, just to show you guys this real life here. So created a new folder on this demo share. It's part of a file share that I've established here. And as you'll notice here, the network path that we're using is the domain name, the domain controller name, and then the network share as part of this. So, and as you'll see here, we've connected now to that demo share. We've got access to that folder I just created here. And that was really cool, right? Because that was just a streamlined process to get that, set up here as part of this process. If we go back into our troubleshooting tool here under hostname acquisition, you'll notice here that we've gotten this private access here, and it's routing it through this generated IP address. And so this is Microsoft Security Service Edge that they've created for us on the back end to help channel and funnel that traffic as part of this. And you'll also notice that we can resolve these domain names here, or the DNS name of our particular server. And this specifically, this name with the ADDSO2 and this dot and then this GUID as an example is actually the client ID of our quick access application that was created as part of this. So I think that's really cool because it shows you the power of all the stitching that they're doing behind the scenes that you didn't actually have to do as an administrator to actually get this set up and to provide that level of access. And again here, if I do and run this command here, this device that we're seeing here is Azure AD joined, but it's not domain joined as part of this. So technically it doesn't have, any line of sight, in a traditional sense that we'd have, to that local network share, which is also very powerful. You think about the flexibility this would provide to anybody who's working remote or in that hybrid situation. Okay, guys, that's everything I had for you today. I hope this provided some helpful information on how to get started with global secure access and some of the various use cases here to move away from VPNs. If you guys are looking for more of the technical, under the hood deep dive, John Savell's done a lot of great videos that I'll link in the video description if you want to check those out. But definitely leave any comments for anything that you guys saw that you have questions about. Otherwise, I'll see you guys next week.